Hi there, my name is Lauren, and I'm a book launch account manager and a sort of kind of writer in the making slash author-ish on the side. I create videos that combine both my personal knowledge and professional knowledge, merge those together to create the content you see on this page. Now you might be wondering, Lauren, my dude, what does that have to do with Yellowstone? Well, I happen to have written a book about Yellowstone that I am attempting to get published, but that's another story for another time. So I thought in the meantime, I would share my personal knowledge of what it's like working as a housekeeper in Yellowstone. I was there in Yellowstone for 2 summers, or 2 seasons as the locals call it. The reason that I decided to get a job in Yellowstone National Park in the first place was because my dad did it for a few summers back in the 1980s. And after one summer of heinous boredom and wanderlust, I was like, yo, Dad, I want to do something different. He's like, hey, you should check out Yellowstone. So I did, and thus this video was born. That's actually why I went to Yellowstone. It was for you guys to make this video. And if you don't know, Yellowstone is a giant figure 8, and Mammoth is like the first town, I guess you could, I don't even know, like they're not towns, they're not cities, but it's like the first like establishment, I guess, like right when you enter the park, which is where you do a lot of your checking in if you're a new employee. So the building that you go to looks like, oh God, what's that name of that school from Matilda? Cruncham Hall. I swear to God, looks just like Cruncham Hall. And there I got 2 uniforms to last me for an entire week. So when I wake up in the morning, or when I did wake up in the morning, I would go to my closet, which was like this very tall thing. By the way, you're living in a dorm. Get dressed, head over to the EDR, which is an acronym for the employee dining room, which is where, as the title implies, all the employees in the area eat, which I didn't mention this, but I worked in Lake, which is another town section establishment of Yellowstone. It's like in the, hold on a minute, southeastern part of the park. Pretty much Lake is known for the lake, and also the Lake Yellowstone Hotel, which is a pretty good looking establishment. So the EDR, the employee dining room, connects to the hotel, but we can't go into the hotel from the employee dining room. Otherwise you would be crossing through the kitchen, which is where they prepare the meals for the dining room inside of the hotel. So we had to go down these metal stairs from the EDR around the corner to another employee door where we would clock in and go all the way upstairs to the 2nd floor conference room for our daily meetings, which could have been summed up in 10 minutes, but for some reason they always went on for 30. We would wait for 2 people, our managers and our inspectors, and an inspector is kind of like one step up from a housekeeper. They basically just go around and check the work, the rooms that the housekeepers cleaned, or room attendants is what we would call them, RAs for short. They were the ones to issue us our cleaning lists, so like what rooms we were going to be cleaning. And then there were the managers who were, they just, I don't know, they just did managery things. While in the conference room, we would get our lists of rooms. And I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but I feel like this is important in terms of context. And there were 3 different rooms you would have to clean. The first one, which was the most work and the most frequent, were called do-outs. We cleaned the rooms completely after the guests checked out. And then you had occupieds, which was a little bit better, and as you can probably deduce, I think that's the right word, these were rooms that the guests were still staying in, but they were out for the day, going around touring, doing whatever they wanted, and we would go in to just kind of tidy up around the edges, like clean the bathroom, make the bed, all that stuff. And then the third kind of room was the best kind of room, and the more of these that you had, the easier day you would have, and it was called the softer footprint rooms. And the softer footprint was kind of a way to encourage guests to become more environmentally friendly during their stay. They didn't want to be bothered, is basically what it meant. They didn't want new towels, they didn't want new amenities. It was an effort to reduce water usage for the laundry people back up in Mammoth who cleaned all the sheets and towels and stuff, and reduce trash. So if you got a softer footprint room, you really didn't have to do anything. I'm sorry, I just have to throw this in real fast. What I found, and what many of us found to be really ironic about Yellowstone, or I guess I should say ironic about Xanterra, Yellowstone would host guests in the Lake Yellowstone Hotel that were from these very large oil companies. They were like these big wig, you know, businessy guys who would stay there. Anyway, after the conference room, after getting your lists, after listening to the managers go through like new things that are, you know, upcoming, special guests who are going to be staying, you know, new ways of cleaning rooms and whatever, we would get to the most embarrassing part of my day, which was team bonding. But it wasn't like regular, you know, share your hearts and thoughts, team bonding, it was stretching in front of the hotel, particularly in front of the sunroom, where all of the guests happened to lounge. And this tacked on like another 20 minutes onto our morning. Like, we couldn't just like go in, like clock in and work. It's like there's like this whole build up, and the team bonding stretching was part of it. So we would have to do that. It would be literally like bending down, touching your toes, all that stuff. And then the entire housekeeping team would break off to the respective places where they would be working. And this was one of 3 places. You had the actual hotel, which was a lot harder actually, just because there was a much bigger emphasis on presentation because it was the hotel. You also had management in the hotel, so that was, it was a little more micromanaging. There was also Sandpiper, which is kind of like almost like a motel-ish version of the hotel. It was originally constructed to be another dorm, and while my dad was in Yellowstone, actually, he saw it being constructed during his last summer working there. So I guess they like renovated it to be like another version of the hotel. So very similar procedures, just a little less high stakes. You could kind of have a little more, wiggle room with how you wanted to clean the room. Like, you didn't have people watching you as closely, so that was nice. And then the third place, which is where I worked, is the cabins. And they're called cottages now, but they're cabins. I actually didn't really like it at first, but basically you work outside the whole day, so you get a real nice farmer stand going. Mine was impeccable. And you would basically carry what is this mule cart behind you. So like you were the mule carrying your cart full of like bins and trash bags and a dinosaur vacuum that had to have been at least a decade old behind you, up and down the very large hill. But that was really nice because you didn't have anyone messing with you because you were outside. I mean, even your inspectors, the people who were like on like above you checking your work, I mean, they really didn't bug you unless they needed something like directly from you. So you were able to kind of chill out a little more, get into more of a flow state, listen to your playlist, all that stuff, which by the way, there was no internet. So any playlist you had to have been saved on your phone, meaning that you could be listening to the same playlist for at least a month straight. So if you wanted to download more playlists, you'd have to like go into Civilization, which was like 2 hours away. So it was, when you went out, you would have to commit yourself to going out. Like, you would download everything onto your phone. You want a new audiobook? Download it. You want a new playlist? Download it. Like, you want to check social media? Download it. Because you couldn't check social media because there was no internet. So after getting done with stretching, everyone breaking off into their respective places, me being someone who worked in the cabins, I would walk with everyone across the parking lot, across the VIP parking lot where they do valet parking, down the very large hill to the cabin office resting at the base of that hill. And if you were first to get to the cabin office, you could pick the good cart, meaning that you would, have dibs on the cart that actually had air in its tires, and the rest of us had to drag like, these wheels behind us that were popped and deflated. It's character building. So the key that you would get in the morning, which was the key that would allow you into like all the different rooms in the hotel or in Sandpiper or the cabins, your key would have like a code on it, like 2E or 3A or something, which would match the respective bins full of supplies that you would either put on your cart or on your mule cart. So for example, if my key said 2A, I would go into the cabin office because that's where I worked, and I would look for all of the bins, which should be stacked on top of each other, that would all have 2A on it. And I knew that those were going to be my bins for the day, and I would place them in my mule cart. I'm just going to keep calling it a mule cart. So you'd get those bins, make sure you just kind of have the basics, because usually you're supposed to stock your bins the day before, but the LTDs, which there's a lot of acronyms, but an LTD is a linen truck driver, and they're the ones who basically bring you all of your supplies, so you want to be really nice to them. They do a lot of driving. At the end of the day, our supplies wouldn't be filled, until much later because, they were running behind or they were low on towels or sheets or whatever, and so sometimes we would have more the next morning because the LTDs came later. So at that point, we would be able to like grab extra stuff and like throw last minute things into our bins. So you'd stack the bins onto our carts, pick out one of the few working dinosaur vacuums, which that only meant like 1 out of the 8 that were there. And we would like flip it so it would lay long ways over our cart so that, that was just like the best way it would fit. And then of course you'd have all the trash bags. There were blue and white trash bags for different reasons, just because it's easier for laundry people up north to sort it out. And then you would have blue rags. And blue rags are the rags that you would clean with. They're just like stained rags. So all of this is like, I'm really bad at guesstimating, but like 20 some pounds of supplies that we would have to carry behind us up and down this hill and go back and forth to replenish throughout the day. You never miss leg day. I think one day I clocked in like 8 miles a day. It's ridiculous. And that was just, you know, during that 10 or 11 hour day I was working. If you're like in the hotel or sandpiper, there's more, like you're going more up and down than out and about. So if you're working in the hotel or cabins, you're gonna be climbing a lot of stairs. After eating breakfast, after clocking in, after the conference room, after the god-awful stretching, after we would disperse, for me at least, my goal was to clean at least 3 rooms before we got our break for lunch. 3 was usually a good number to root for. It would, you know, ebb and flow depending on if you were training someone, which in that case you could do like 5 rooms before lunch, or if you had a bunch of really messy rooms, you know, you could only maybe get a couple done in the, you know, few hours you were working. And the other, and this was another really awkward part that I forgot about that I really didn't like, is that we really didn't actually start working and like knocking on the doors like, hello, housekeeping, until maybe like 8:30. And some people are still sleeping at 8:30. And we would get these like groggy people answering the door, like their eyes half closed, like their hair's a mess, they still got their pajamas on, and you're like, I didn't know, I'm sorry, this is just my job, I'll come back later. So you'd break for lunch, and of course there's like a time window for this, like, I don't know, 11:30 to 1:30 or something. And I remember you couldn't eat your lunch for more than like 35 minutes or 32 minutes or something. It was like a really arbitrary number. But I think I remember the reason for this being because if you ate a longer lunch, Xanterra, the company that was like in charge of the whole hospitality part of the national parks, like hosting people and tourists and all that, they would have to pay you for being on your lunch break, if I understand that correctly, which is really silly because they're like the largest concessionaire in the country, owned by a guy whose net worth is like over $7 billion. So why they don't give us better vacuums or longer lunch breaks, I don't know. Anyway, you'd have your lunch, you'd clock back in, get ready. Usually at this time, it would be wise to bring all your stuff down to the cabin office, refill it, replenish it as needed, and then continue with the rest of your rooms. If you were one of the early birds who got their list on early, in a way you were punished for being efficient, because you would be assigned to help someone else who was maybe running behind or has, you know, had more messier rooms on their list, so they took longer to clean and they were behind. So it's optimistic in that it's like very teamwork oriented, but the downside of that is that if you finish, you're going to be cleaning more rooms than someone who's like working average, like at an average pace or slower. So at the end of the day, when everyone was done, the inspectors would go around checking rooms, typing them into the computer, which would kind of send a status update to the front desk of the hotel. We would start to restock our bins as best as we could because, as you may recall, we were often low on supplies all the time, especially at the end of the day. And once you got done restocking your bins, putting all the stuff away, putting your cart back, your meal cart back, your inspector would come over, check out all your stuff, make sure that you have everything to the best of your ability because we're always low on supplies, and they would have to sign off your list. But before you could go, like you couldn't just go home after that. They would radio the entire lake hotel kind of area, meaning the hotel, Sandpiper, whatever else, and they would ask all the other inspectors, hey, I've got a couple free room attendants, do you need help anywhere? You would cross your fingers and pray that you wouldn't have to clean more rooms. So if you got called to the hotel, that was always the place that had the most rooms to clean and were like chronically behind. If you got sent to Sandpiper, that's a little bit better because it's smaller. You don't have management over there as often. So either you would get called over or you would stay behind and help fix any last minute problems that would come up around the cabins. So I remember there was one inspector in particular who's notorious for like right when he's about to sign off your list, he'd be like, oh, hey, we have a cabin whose toilet overflowed in cabin 510. Would you, hey, if anyone else wants to volunteer, you guys can go up and clean that. And I'm thinking, A, who wants to volunteer their time to clean up an overflowed toilet at the end of their day? And B, you're a terrible person for bringing this up last minute. After all of that, you wouldn't get off until maybe around 6:30, 7 o'clock. And if you ended at 6:30, that also happens to be the time that the EDR, the employee dining room, closes for the whole night. doesn't reopen until the next morning for breakfast. So sometimes we would have to rush over to the hotel, pray that management would let us go, turn in our signed lists, and then literally run to the EDR to grab dinner before it closes, which I know made a lot of the kitchen staff mad probably, but it's like, it's either like you rush and, you know, push their schedule 10 minutes behind because you need to eat something, or you spend any of your tip money on vending machine food, or you can eat any snacks that you may have stashed in your room. And if you want to have snacks stashed in your room, you either get them from the vending machine or you drive 2.5 hours east to Cody, Wyoming to the nearest Walmart. So after that, it was pretty much your time. No one wanted anything from you after you got off work, which was nice. So it's like if you were on, you were on. If you were off, you were off. So we'd go back, shower, change into our regular human clothes or, you know, sweatpants or whatever, and then we just kind of chill. You could do whatever you wanted. You could hang out with your friends in some of the other dorms. You could go to the pub, which was just down the road, it's like an employee pub, which was nice. You could go to a party knowing you'd be working the next day. That was pretty normal to do. Some people would go night hiking. Some people would go drunk night hiking, which I think is the dumbest thing you could do, considering that there are bears and bison and elk roaming freely at all times, always. It was very, very rare to ever get off early. And by early, I mean like 2 o'clock. That's like a half day at school, if you remember those. Half days were awesome. And I remember one time we got off so early that some friends and I actually got together and went hiking right after work that afternoon. We climbed Avalanche Peak, and that was a really good time. But if you did get off early, normally what would happen is management would think of every possible way to keep you behind until the rest of the group was finished. So I remember one time, there's one manager in particular, she was only there for my first summer and no one liked her, and she told a friend and I to polish the doorknobs. If it looks like the camera moved, I'm sorry. I ran out of storage space. And another thing they made us do was broom cobwebs off the back doors of the hotel that no one came through. Or at least the guests didn't come through. Maybe like some maintenance people would, but it's like, what do they care? You know, no one sees it. And one thing that happened to me was I got off early because the second summer I went back and I worked as an inspector. So I'm more referring to my first season as a housekeeper when I'm talking about all this. But the second season, when I was an inspector, my team got done. I was like, all right, wrap up the last of these tasks. I'm gonna go check in with management, see if there's anything else. And one of them made me sit in a chair outside of the office to just wait for the rest of my team to come back. If you can hear squealing in the back, that's my radiator. But yeah, I just had to sit there and wait for my whole team to finish up and come back because she was like, well, the inspector isn't supposed to get checked out before the room attendants. Usually the room attendants check out first and then it's you, so you're just gonna have to sit there. And I'm like, I've never heard of that until today. Anyway, if there's anything to take from this experience is that they are not kidding when they say that they are a work hard, play hard atmosphere. When you're working, you're working. When you're off, you can do whatever you want. You can go hiking, you can go camping, you could go to the river, like, I don't know, go swimming in a geyser. Actually, you can't do that. That's illegal. Yeah, if you went swimming in a geyser, you'd like boil alive. Those things are really hot. So that is all I have for today. Hopefully it was enlightening, insightful, somewhat funny. Be sure to like and subscribe this video, and thank you for taking a chance on someone with minimal subscribers. Also, be sure to check out my website. It is dedicated to writing and publishing topics, as well as updates and even a free sample chapter of my memoir, working in Yellowstone National Park as a seasonal employee. I also have a newsletter that comes out weekly talking about just general insights that I have, book recommendations, blog updates, things of the sort, so be sure to subscribe to that. Excuse the radiator in the back, and I'll see you next time.